need to handle all of this logic for all those button presses. So that's what's happening in here. So today we're just going to go over part 1 for the HUD system for Pokémon Red. And it's pretty simple right now. We just have the main menu and the start of the inventory system. And that's about it at the moment. We'll be adding more to it later. But first we need to understand exactly how we needed the inventory system, or the whole HUD system, to work. In Pokemon, it's all done through the button presses. There's no mouse interaction, obviously. So all we do is we treat our WASD as if they were the D-pad. So we can walk around with it, and then when we hit escape, which is our start button, we want to open up the main menu. And now our movement keys turn into our menu controls. So we needed to create a cursor that moves, and we also needed a system to stack the menus, so that if I'm already in a menu and I open a new menu, it can open this on top, move the cursor over, and now we can cycle through this. And if I press start or escape, closes that, and we're back in the first menu, and I hit it again, and then we're back in game and we can move around. So let's take a look at the code for what exactly is going on here. So we're going to start in the HUD Core, and we'll just kind of run down through here and see what's going on. I went over the Plane Master in the other video, so we won't really go into that. The main thing we're going to focus on is the screen object that we created here. So first, we have it defined as a client variable. We have the interface overlay, which is just object screen, and we make a new one for the client. And all this is just an object that we add to our screen, so that we can then add things into its visual contents and keep it all organized in a nice little hierarchy. Now, we can't use an associative list with visual contents, so we had to do a little bit of a workaround here. That's where this proc comes into play. And all we do when a new client is created, we pass in a key and the type for that specific menu. And in this proc, all it does is we create a new object of the type, and then we add it into our viz contents map, which is just an empty list by default, at the keys location, which is going to be cursor, main menu, inventory, dialog, etc., etc. And then we set our newly created object to be in our visual contents map. And this allows us to access it without having to, or we can access it like a dictionary. And I'll show you that in just a second. So first we come through, we have our new client, and we add onto our screen the interface overlay, and then we call our custom proc to add in all of our menus. And then down here we have the actual type for our base HUD. So this is just object HUD, and we give it a default icon, and we give it, we set pixel scale appearance flag, so if we scale it, the items will remain pixelated and not really blur on us. We're going to assign its layer to the HUD layer. And then we're going to give it 2 new variables. We just want a title, and then we want a list of all of the menu items within the HUD. And you're going to see how that works just in a second. So under that, we have our base cursor. And the cursor is inheriting from our HUD. So it's just another HUD object, but this one is specifically for a cursor. And so I change the icon in the icon state, and it's just this little black arrow that points. And we just need our cursor to know a target and the current position it's at in a menu. And that's kind of all that goes into the object itself. Now in our menus, we actually are going to have that list of those menu items, and for the most part it's going to be a bunch of buttons that we create. So this is just another type, and we give it a few new variables. We want to know what the parent menu is, if it needs a specific cursor style, and this is just going to be, you know, if this cursor is hollow or if it's pointed in another direction or anything like that. So for the most part it will always just remain as filled, so we don't have to worry about it. And then we create a custom proc for the button specifically. So all buttons will be able to access this proc. And all it really does is animate the position of our cursor to the pixel X and Y of our parent menu. We just know this gets called every time the cursor is moved, and we're just repositioning it so that it lines up with whatever we're pointing at. So you can see here, this is an example of accessing our visual contents map that we created up top. And all we're doing here is we're grabbing the client because it's a client variable that we have defined right here. So we're accessing the client's variable, visual contents map. And then we're just going to pass in the key, which we're treating like a dictionary. So we know cursor, we created up top on client new right here. So we're accessing the list entry at the cursor key. We know that that's going to be an object HUD cursor type. So that's all we do with this so that we can access a specific menu more easily. And so we're going to be using that throughout the code a lot. And you can see down here, this is just for the cursor style. We just change it if we have to. So it's all handled right here whenever the cursor's moved. Pretty easy. Now down here we have the HUD menu, which is going to be the base for pretty much every menu that pops up. So we've got the main menu, which is going to inherit from menu. And then we also have the inventory menu that inherits. And then we'll also have, the Pokemon menu and the Pokedex. It will all inherit from this base menu here. So we put it on the menu layer, and then we set a couple of variables. Like we turn the alpha to 0 because I want to do a little fade in animation, which I will show you right down here in a second. And then we also want to scale the menu up. So when you open your menu, it's a little hard to see because it's quick, but you can see it doesn't just appear, it scales up instantly. So it kind of gives it a little bit more of a menu opening animation. That's just a little bit of polish, it's not really necessary. So we have a couple procs defined for our menu. The first being toggle menu, very self-explanatory. We just call it on a specific menu, and we just check if it's in our menu stack, we're going to close the menu, but if it's not, we're going to open it. And the menu stack is what I was talking about earlier, where we need to know how many menus are open. So when I press escape, which is my start button, and I open this, we know we have one menu open, and now we can't walk around anymore. And if we open this, we have two menus open, which we can actually see in action over here. I have test menu stack. You see there's no results in here, but when we open this and test it, we have the main menu open. And then when we open the inventory and test it, you can see now we have two menus open in that specific order. So we know at the bottom of the list, it's the latest entry, therefore it is our active menu. So when we close this, we know this is now the only one here. It's now our active menu. And that's sort of the same logic that we just apply to every menu that opens, so that we're able to stack potentially thousands of menus on top of each other. And you could just sit there and spam the B button and be able to get back to your in-game menu. So now we have our open menu proc, and this is called every time we need to open a menu. We're just going to run through here, and I just quickly reorganize the planes for the existing menu so we know the latest menu will always appear on top and everything else will be below it. And then we just need to tell the client, hey, we're in a menu now, because we just opened a menu, which is how we determine in our client controls right here. We're just doing a check to see if we're in game, we need to handle movement. But if we're in a menu, we need to handle our cursor movement. So then we're going to access our cursor within our screen, and we just want to check to make sure that if there's no cursor already in our screen right here, then we need to add the cursor onto the screen. Because if there's no menus open, there's clearly no cursor on the screen either, and that's its own object. So when the menu opens, we check, hey, there's not a cursor, so we're going to add it to the screen at the right location. And then we just check if there is a menu stack entry, which is, there's always going to be one when we first open a menu. As we open it, we can test, and we see, yes, there's a main menu here. So if there is, then we're going to assign our cursor's target to be the last entry of the menu. So that's how, when we open a second menu, we know the bottom entry of our stack is now the inventory. So we swap our target from our main menu to the inventory. And then when we close it, since there's only one menu here, we know the target is now here. And then we close the final menu, and there's nothing in there, so we have no target. So this will technically never run on an open menu. It's just here for error prevention. And all this does is, if there's no entry in our menu stack, we're going to set the target to null, and then we're going to remove the cursor from the screen as well. So then here, what we do once the menu's open, we just quickly assign our cursor's current position is going to be 1, because we just want the menu to start at the very top. That's why even if I come down here and then I close it, and then I reopen it, we're back at the top. Because every time a menu is opened, we access the top menu. And we can adjust this later to save our cursor's position, for example. So if I close this, you can see we're back at the top, and maybe we should be on the item because we had just opened it from here. And that's something we can change later relatively easily. And then sort of the same thing here, we're just going to check if we have a target and there are menu items within our target, we're just going to move the cursor to that first position. Remember, this is all happening just when the menu opens. And then finally, we just want to add this new menu into the visual contents of our client's interface overlay. And then we do a quick little animation to scale the menu up. And that's all that really happens in opening the menu. And sort of the opposite happens in closing a menu. We're just going to remove the menu from our stack. And then we just check if we still have menus open. We're just going to output the new menu that we're moving to, which you can see down here. When I open it, I close that, it says, oh, went to the main menu. And then went to no target. So when we go to the main menu, so we close the inventory, we go to the main menu, we're going to just assign the target to our cursor's target to the last menu entry. Then we're going to put our position back to 1, which is going to be the top of the menu. And then we need to update the displayed slots, and we'll go into that just in a second. It's down here. And then, of course, we move our cursor, just like the other proc. And then this is the else statement. It just says, hey, we didn't have a target. When we close it, there's no other menus still open, so we're going to say target is null. We're going to remove the cursor from the screen. And then we're going to say, hey, since there's no menus, we know we're back in game. And that's how we change between these two, for being able to move in the game or for navigating our menus. And then we do our little animation and then remove this menu from the visual contents of our interface overlay. So this proc is technically it's on all menus, but right now we're only going to be using it for the inventory. So in the inventory, when we open it, you can see we have 5 slots that we're showing, but in reality, we have 20 inventory slots that we can see. When we get to the bottom, it loops back up to the top. Now, This kind of looks like it's scrolling, but really what we're doing code-wise here is we update the display slots anytime the cursor reaches the threshold of outside of the 5 buttons we want to display. If we get outside of this range, then we're going to call update displayed slots. And in here, all we're going to do is clear the visual contents of the menu we're on, which is going to be the inventory. So we remove all 5 of these. This would be empty. And then we're just going to loop through real quick and select from our current position 2 plus 4 and add in that specific button to the screen. So anytime we press down here, it wipes it, it loops through and it checks which ones need to be displayed, and then it adds those into the screen. And so that's it for the core. We have our specific menu creation up here. So this is, for example, the main menu. So right here, this is for this menu specifically. And all we're doing is we assign a list of strings to the menu items of the main menu. And I did this so that it's just easy for us to have a bunch of strings, and then we're going to overwrite it down here and update what exactly is in our menu items. So when the new main menu is created, we're going to store our menu items into a new list of old menu items. And then we're going to set our menu items to being empty. Now we're going to loop through all of the old menu items, which right now, old menu items is this. And then we're going to create a new button, and we're going to set up a few variables on this new button here. We're going to assign the parent menu we know as the source, which is the main menu. And we're going to give it a layer, which is just going to be equal to our main menu's layer plus 1. The ID is going to be whatever entry we are at in the old menu items. So the ID is going to be Pokedex, Pokemon, item, trainer, etc. And then we just set the pixel X and Y offset, and we increment the item, the height counter, each time we loop through, which is minus 16 pixels from it. And that's how we create them, and it just comes down like this. It's all evenly spaced out for us. And then finally, we add our newly created button right here into the menu items, and then add that button into the visual contents of the main menu. So now once this is done, our menu items is no longer a list of strings. It's going to be a list of these newly created buttons with all of these variables. So the inventory is going to be a similar concept, except instead of having to do this little bit of a workaround with the menu item swapping, all we're going to do is just do a quick for loop. Whatever our inventory size limit is, which is 20 by default, we'll just create a new button, assign all the variables, give it a default map text, and then add that to our menu items. And then update which ones we want to display. And so finally, we need the actual controls that happen when we are pressing any of our buttons. So if we're pressing up, down, left, right, or start, or A, which is interact, which is our space bar on the computer. And we need to handle all of this logic for all those button presses. So that's what's happening in here. So right here is where we define the actual menu stack, which you can see, we've talked about it a little bit, but you can see all it is just a list of our menu type, object HUD menu, and it's just an empty list by default. We also create a client state, which we've also been accessing, and you can see all it is it says if we're in game or if we're in a menu. That's all this is really used for, so we know how to handle our inputs. And it's just a test verb, so we can see that I was using before, just so we can see what menus are currently open. And this obviously updates the client state whenever we need to change it between in-game and in-menu. But finally, let's go. The actual proc is start button, and this is called anytime you press escape. It's going to be over in client controls. So if we wanted to change what the key was bound to, we could change escape to be, I, for example. And now when you press I on your keyboard, it'll call our start button proc. That's fine. So all we do is a quick switch statement to check if what our client state is, to see if we're in game or in the menu, and then act based on that. So if we're in game and we do not have any menus open, then we're going to open the main menu. Now, if we're already in a menu, then we're going to make sure if there is a menu here, just error prevention, then we're going to grab our current menu, make a new variable, store whatever the current menu is, which we can do by grabbing the last entry of the menu stack. And then we're going to close the last menu. That's how we have two menus open and we hit escape. We want to close the last menu that's open, which is this, and then we hit it again. Now we're back in game. That's all the logic we need to handle that. It's actually really simple. Select doesn't do anything yet. Interact, this would be the A button in Pokemon. This is a little more complex, but it's actually really simple if you just take it line by line. So first we check if we're in a menu. Then we're going to do a switch statement based on access our cursor. And then we check our cursor's target. And then we're checking the type of the target. So if our cursor's target is the main menu, then we're going to go to another switch statement to determine the button ID, which we right in here. Remember, the button ID is assigned to I, and I is just going to be the name from the old menu item. So the button ID is going to be one of these. That's all we're checking here. And so we say, okay, if it's the Pokedex, we're just going to output a message, which you can see in here. If you hit space, it'll output that message there. But when we get to the item, it actually does something because we have that created. So all we're doing is accessing visual contents map. And we know if we're interacting with the item button from our main menu, we want to toggle the inventory. So we just open it. And all of the code we have to handle the target swapping is handled when menus are opened and closed. So we don't have to worry about any of that here. All we have to do is actually open the menu. But later we'll go through and we'll start adding in more functionality for everything else. But for now, this is plenty. So if we jump back a switch statement, so now we come back to our first switch where we're just checking the type of our target that our cursor is pointing at. So if it's not a main menu, if it's an inventory, then we're just going to access the mob's inventory, and then we're going to grab our cursor's current position, it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to access, and this is just an entry point, so this could be the same as, this. So mob's inventory's third entry, check if there's a stored item there. And if there is a stored item, then we're going to call the use proc on that stored item. We'll go more into detail with that when we get into the proper item system. It's mostly just dummy commands at the moment. Same with the dialogue. Now, if we are not in the item menu, the inventory menu, if we were in a dialogue menu, we hit space, it would output this, and it would call this every time you hit space on your dialog box. So the back button, B button, doesn't do anything yet. And last thing we have to look at is the logic behind where to move the cursor. And so this is right here, we're calling cursor move. Every time we're in a menu and we press W or A, we want to move the cursor north, and if we press S or D, we want to move the cursor south. This kind of looks like a lot, but it's really pretty simple. So first we just check, make sure we have a target. If we don't have a target, we're going to return. Nothing else is going to run here. And then we're going to create a few variables just so it's a little cleaner to read in the code. So instead of having to write this out each time, we can just access current cursor position. So this is exactly like that, but this starts to get a little bloated when you have every variable written out. So this would be that. Because reading this is not as clean as just reading that. That's why we're doing it like this. So the actual logic, first we do a switch to determine the move direction of whatever is passed in, which is going to be south or north, which you can see again right over here. We just pass this in as the argument. So if we pass in south, we're just going to check our cursor's current position. If it's less than the length of the menu items, then we know, okay, we can increment it. If not, we're going to set it to 1. And so that's how we are able to just reach the bottom of it. And we obviously can't go down again, so it knows we're at the limit of the menu. We press down, and actually it brings us back up to the top. We're back at 1. And this code right here is just going to handle the actual determining which slots we want to display based on where the cursor moved to. So, so first, we check the cursor's target. If the target is an inventory menu, which right here is defined as our inventory. So if our target is the inventory, then we're going to check our cursor's current position. If it's greater than our inventory's menu's current displayed start plus 4. So if it's greater than the bottom entry right here, then we know this needs to go up by 1 because we're now going off of our 5 displayed menus. And then we just need to call this proc to update which ones are displayed, because this proc uses the current displayed start variable to determine which ones to show with menu. So then we do the same when we move the cursor in the other direction. And that's all that's really happening here. We're just determining which slots need to be displayed. And that's actually going to be all of this code. So once you just understand what's going on right here, or even really if you just understand these 3 lines, the same logic is applied to all of this. But once we actually determine where the cursor needs to move and which 5 menus need to be displayed, finally at the bottom, all we're going to do is call one of those first procs we looked at, which is the move cursor proc. Just access our cursor, we check the target of our cursor, and then we check the menu items of our target, and then we pass in the current position of our cursor. So this could be, if this was a 3, then we know we're accessing the 3rd entry of the menu items. So whatever our current position is, we access that and we move the cursor to that location. And that is how we're able to navigate between the menu. So that's actually it for this, and there's definitely a lot more that needs to go into the HUD, and hopefully not much will have to be changed. We really try to design it to be flexible with all of the future menus that are going to get added to the game. But that's it for now, and we'll see you guys next time.